Can we burp? No.
Go for it.
I cannot burp on demand.
No?
No. Mm-mm.
You should learn. It's a great tactic.
It's not about learning. There is a condition that I discovered on TikTok.
Of course.
That
Dr. TikTok.
There is like, my whole life I thought something was wrong with me, but there is a condition, and I'm gonna Google it for you and send you later. So
is that a mental health condition?
No, I'm just a Virgo. But no, there's something with your muscles that you can't burp like that. And the treatment for that is you inject Botox in that muscle, and it helps you to relax the esophagus, that's the word, and then you can burp.
That's the most boring use case of Botox ever.
But I think that's the only one that should
that should exist.
Yeah. And I'm seriously considering, because I think I'm missing a lot by not being able to burp on demand.
Iryna Gil, welcome to Origin Story. One of my favourite comedians. We just started on such a comedic start. We're keeping that in. I love you. I love your comedy online. Comedy in person is even better. Being in the room when you're crushing a stage is nothing short of a pleasure, and I want to get to know you and your story. Let's start in Ukraine. Take it back to the origin story.
Oh, shit. All right, so do you want me to do like I was born and, yeah, I was born in, well, technically I was born in Soviet Union. And, yeah, but I still consider that I don't address that part of my birth certificate. I'm Ukrainian. My parents are Ukrainian. Grandparents Ukrainian. Yeah, the whole family, as I know it, are Ukrainians. I grew up in a rural town on the northwest of Ukraine, and I spent a lot of time in villages with my grandparents, one and another, like my fathers and mothers, and love them very much. And I had a career, and I was basically a product manager, a project manager, all that jazz for different IT companies in Ukraine. I also had, I wanted to start performing stand-up comedy, and I did in 2021. And I was quite successful, and I filmed my first, like a full special, you call it, right? Full special on YouTube. And I filmed it February 13th, 2022. And in 11 days, I woke up from bombs falling on my city. So yeah, a bit bitter about that. Like, I'm a bit petty, but yeah.
A bit petty. That's funny.
Yeah, that's...
Tragically funny that you would use such a term that I know you don't mean to describe it. I know you are very passionate about where you come from and the situation that's going on there at the moment. Can you describe for me, given that you grew up in the Soviet Union, so I'm guessing so when did it collapse? 1990?
In 91.
91, and when were you born?
I was born a couple of years, lady never tells, just a couple of years before.
Just a couple of years before.
So I had very early childhood I had, but not a lot of... But the 90s, I can tell you what was happening in the 90s.
How did things change and progress after the collapse of the Soviet Union as you grew up?
In so many ways. First, the biggest one is we finally had bananas. We didn't have those. Yeah. But also, I'm joking, but Ukraine had to rebuild from scratch, from a lot of ruined stuff, and everything you see now in Ukraine is because Ukrainians fought for it. So not a lot of stuff was given. Not a lot of stuff was historically provided. So Soviet Union was a system of upkeep and control, and then when it's collapsed, Ukraine was like, all right, I finally have the ability to, make my own decisions and build everything, and finally have the sovereignty I was fighting for hundreds of years, because that's the history of Ukraine is just, if you do the TLDR, is like, we're trying to be independent, leave us the fuck alone. It's the same for, I don't know, 500-600 years is the same. Just fighting off different invaders and saying like, please guys, we're trying very hard. So after 1991, there was this process of figuring everything out, fighting old ways and trying to set up a country. And yeah, without putting too much trust into the government, because the main thing Soviet Union teaches you is you develop a deep distrust of the government. That's why Ukrainians are so into politics. They're very into state processes. They're very on top of every like spending law. That's why we are so into protesting, because we do not rely on government. We don't elect the same official twice, because we're like, nah, you fucked it up the first time. Next. We're like Ariana Grande, thank you, next. But without the thank you part. And yeah, that's why there's this feature of like self-organizing for Ukrainians, because we don't wait for the government to provide us support in any way. So we organize first, and then in parallel, we put in pressure on the government. So yeah, and it's a very nice feature Ukrainians have, but it's also something they developed out of necessity.
Are there still fragments of Soviet-style communism in Ukraine, or at least when you were growing up? Was there still a fraction of people or society that...
Yeah, we still had Communist Party till like early 2000s, I think, and it was still running in every election, and it just was basically targeting older people and nostalgia. Because when it was like a referendum, would you like to stay in the Soviet Union or not? Overwhelming amount of people said, nah. We want to leave, we want our own independent country. So it was mostly like Communist Party was mostly targeting older people and appealing to nostalgia, appealing like, oh, remember how everyone had access to like, I don't know, free summer trips to the seashore that your factory provided you once a year. Yes, but also in the same factory, the director of that factory had 3 apartments, and you couldn't receive a single one, despite you were in the same queue for governmental apartments. That's the stuff people don't understand about communism. It still was corrupted as hell. And besides, like, oh, everyone gets a free apartment, and everyone gets free healthcare and free education. There is a huge asterisk to that. And in Ukraine, in the 90s and early 2000s, there was still a lot of monuments for Soviet historical figures that were deemed as heroic or something. And because, again, what people don't understand, Soviet Union, they had control over everything. It's a communist regime that had control over what you were watching, what movies were showed in the cinemas, what news lines were in the newspapers today. That's why people didn't know about Chernobyl for weeks after it happened, because the Soviet government just like, we can't. It's May 1st, and the May 1st was a big holiday, and the Soviet Union is like the day of Workers' Day, and they were like, oh, there's a huge parade is planning in Kyiv and in Moscow and in big cities, so we can't cancel that. We can't admit there's a huge amount of radiation in the air, because that puts us in this like precedent of, oh, we didn't manage something. So they still ran the parade. Hundreds of thousands of people went outside despite huge amount of radiation in the air. And that's what people don't understand, is that in Soviet Union, you could not have any alternative source of information. So the history was taught in a very specific way. If you will ask anyone from, especially Russians, when was the World War II, they will tell you it started in 1941. Every monument in Russia and ex-Soviet Union about World War II, it would be like 1941, 1945. it's something that we were taught in school as well. But then there was like asterisk. But actually, it started in 1939 with Soviets actually aligning with Nazis and dividing Poland. But every monument in Russia still has 1941 to 1945, because they have their own history, their own way of teaching history, and they have a control over it. That's why the population is like, oh yeah, we were these specific people because the government told us we were, so why would we question that? And Ukrainians were like, nah, that's bullshit. We remember that. That's not how it went.
How did that bleed on to things such as family, ambition, work ethic?
Family, ambition, work ethic. Oh, yeah. I unfortunately have this thing from my mother and father that's called, I have this huge sense when something like, how do you call it? Sense of injustice, when you can't accept injustice. So my father has it and my mom has it. And for example, my father was fired because he was like, from his job, he was a construction worker, because he openly argued with the boss for stuff that all of the other workers disagreed. But he was the one that talked, he spoke up, that's the correct way of saying it.
Outspoken almost?
Yeah, and he was fired. And my mom had exactly the same problem. She was like, when she was younger, she had this like strong sense of justice, and and that unfortunately trickled down into me. So that I believe that's something like a Ukrainian feature. But the work ethic, Ukrainians work hard, work a lot. We're overachievers, horrible overachievers, especially in Kyiv. In Kyiv, there's just the hustle culture in Kyiv makes whatever happening in the UK seem like child play, because we are like very into titles. So a lot of people in Kyiv, especially younger generation, are being the CEO before 30, owning their own projects. They're like fashion brands and opening third wave cafes, and they're just very entrepreneurial.
Is it in the same way or the same reward systems that we have in the UK? In the UK, it's because people want to flash on Instagram and keep up with people in their street, and it's very reliant on external validation. But in a world that was previously governed by a Soviet regime, is it for sustenance and resources and money and food on the table? Is that the reason people chase that hustle culture in Ukraine opposed to the status that it holds in the UK? Is it a status game or is it a resource battle?
I don't think it's a little bit of both. So for sure there is an element of, how do you call it, peacockness. So there's a little bit of, yeah, I have to show people that I'm doing well, especially on Instagram. So I will be still treated as a successful person that I channel. But it also was the understanding that there's no way to progress in your career in the natural, like living in this, working in the same place for 20 years, and you will definitely get to that type of compensation, for example. It's not a thing in Ukraine. So a lot of people saw it and they were like, well, if I cannot get to this level of resources, of life, this linear way that worked maybe for my parents, but actually didn't work because there were not a lot of rich people in Soviet Union besides members of the Communist Party, ironically. But they thought, yes, I cannot get rich in linear way. I'm gonna make my own way of getting to that level. And that's why a lot of people are they're working a lot. There's this hustle culture. There's also this immense pressure of Eastern Europe to make sure that you look at your best way. Everything you have is of the best quality. And also this way of, we have a saying in Ukraine, what will people say, right? So it's like you really have to make sure that you will present yourself in this like very specific high quality way. That's why Eastern European women, you look at that, any beauty procedure for Eastern European women, the best quality for it if it's unnoticeable. It's like you're not putting effort into looking good, but you're still looking good. It's like the best level of putting yourself together. It's just, I'm effortlessly this good, but in reality, it's a lot of effort and money.
What does the Western societies not understand about communism? For me, growing up, what I learned about communism through school is there's no class system, everyone gets access to accommodation, and it sounds like a economic regime. But I know from some of my Eastern European friends and hearing you speak on podcasts that it's very much a political and ideological problem as much as it is economic one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I said before, and I'm going to say it again. And people here view communism as an antidote to capitalism. It's just something that they view that will fix strictly economic problems. But what they miss is that it is a political regime, and one of the side effects is the economic government control of economics. What it also means is that when people say like, oh, you get access to free housing, as I said before, there was still very much a class system in the Soviet Union. And again, people that benefited the most from that Soviet Union was the members of the Communist Party. The higher your rank was in Communist Party, the better your life was. There's a specific thing that was like, if you will talk about Soviet Union, there was this thing, especially towards the end of the Soviet Union, but there would be queues to stores, hours and hours of queues. And you would go to the store and there would be nothing there. Like, I don't know, maybe like frozen peas or something, and nothing else. So there's no way for you to get something. For example, my family didn't have a camera till like 90s. We don't have family photos because it was so expensive and so hard to get your hand on something like a photo camera. Video camera? What do you mean? Where did you get that from? There was no such thing. If you got a video camera, you probably got it sent to you from abroad. If you got it sent to you from abroad, who the hell do you have abroad? And what are they telling you? And most importantly, what are you telling them? And it was a whole thing. Like jeans were contraband. Jeans were contraband. It was like, oh my God, you got jeans?
Fuck.
That's what people don't understand. They think the communism is like literally utopian idea of everyone just getting housing and you know that meme that goes on Twitter very hard. It's like a Twitter screenshot from Twitter. The person saying like, "Comrades, what are you doing after communism will win?" And there's a reply like, "Oh, I'm just will contribute to my community. Will grow vegetables on my farm and do some classes." And the reply is, "Your farm?" Capital your, because what do you mean your farm? There's nothing yours. Everything is ours. And that's true. You don't have anything. Private property is not a thing, obviously. You have your governmental apartment if you are a part of governmental apparatus, but that can be taken away if you will if you have views that are a little bit more progressive or radical that the party views are. And you're getting out of that apartment real quick, and you're not getting into a new apartment. You're getting into KGB, right? So that's what people get. Like, oh, under Soviet Union, all of those homeless people are no homeless people on the streets. It's not because they got affordable housing. It's not. Trust me, it's not. It's what people don't understand. It's like, that's why Eastern Europe is so not accessible to people with disabilities, because people with disabilities would be a bad look for Soviet Union, because it was like, what do you mean our people are all this almost Aryan dream of whatever? So there was no pandases, there was no accessible things for wheelchair users. No, if you unfortunately would became an amputee or a handicap, there was no system of support for you in the Soviet Union, because you are not useful for your country in that way. So, sucks to be you, fella. But that's exactly what happened after World War II, where a lot of people, like soldiers, came back with no legs, no hands, and Soviet Union did not support them in any way. And on the first anniversary of celebration of the World War II end, which was May 9th, so it would be like a huge military parade, there was a lot of those amputees in Moscow and a lot of big cities that would be like, how you call it, sore thumb, right?
Yeah, where something sticks out.
Sticks out. There would be the reminder that this is the price you have for this. So overnight, they all disappeared in Moscow. And trust me, they didn't go on a farm and with, to play on fields, or what do you say about your dead dogs, right? It's a very strict system that relied on very specific type of people to uphold it. And if you didn't match that description, the system would be extremely violent to you. So that's the Soviet Union I know. And that's what people don't probably miss from the view of the Soviet Union that they got from TikTok.
The meme that you used to bring it to life around your farm opposed to our farm, does that shared sense of collectivism of assets, real life tangible things, also transcend to opinions? Like, for example, this is your opinions are not your opinions, they're our opinions. Therefore, the question I'm asking is, are you penalized if you have a progressive opinion that's outside of the collective Soviet viewpoint? Would you be punished for having something that's more progressive than their regime?
In Soviet Union, absolutely. That's why Soviet Union routinely targeted all the poets, all the writers, all of the political activists. There was, that was a routine thing and it happened almost in every Soviet republic. You just have to really, the info is right there. I mean, the system of gulags, it was on for years and years after, I think, when is it, this assemble? I think in the 80s? In the 80s, there were still labor camps all over Russia, and there's still colonies in Russia, in far, far north and east. So I don't think that right now in Ukraine, we really try to fight that, but we have a very specific situation now that when the invasion is happening, you really have to understand that you can have any opinion you can, but you have to understand that there's this existential threat, and you have to fight against it, whether you're on different political spectrums or something, because it kills you no matter what political views or what type of opinions you had. So as much as we have a lot of political opinions, that's why there's a saying that for two Ukrainians, there are three Ottomans. There's three how would you translate Ottoman? We call it hetmans, which is a military title. So for two workers, there are three managers, for example, to translate it to your capitalist terms. But yeah, because we have so many opinions, it's hard for us to agree on anything for Ukrainians. But when the threat comes, we're like, yeah, we will fight about whatever we had before, but now we have to do this. But then as soon as that threat will be handled, we'll go back to fighting between us. So yeah. So in Soviet Union, yeah, you would be definitely punished for having views that would part from official course of the Communist Party.
In today's world, pre-invasion, Ukraine, and still very much is now, post-invasion, Ukrainians are so beautifully expressive and creative and innovative. I mean, you're a prime example of this, right? As a stand-up comic, how dear do you hold that sense of creativity, given that 20, 30, 40 years before it was stifled?
It just, first of all, again, all of that was developed out of necessity, a lot of it. And I give you just an example. I was asked to go to BBC to give a commentary, right, about the week that was a big scandal in the Oval Office with Trump yelling at Zelensky and J.D. Vance yelling at Zelensky about suits. BBC asked me to give a commentary, so I went there, and they asked me all these questions, which I answered hundreds of times to different journalists, you know, like, oh, why don't you want peace? And I remember we wrapped it up. I was as, you know, I tried to explain stuff, add more context. And I remember one of the hosts was seeing us out of the studio, and he was like, oh, you're so incredibly articulated about this topic. And I was like, thanks. I had hundreds of infuriating conversations that made me to be as articulate as possible about stuff, because basically it's like every time you're having a conversation like that, the stakes for you is just having a small talk. The stake for me is try to give you as much context as possible so you will understand why it is happening. So when you're talking to your friends, you will not repeat something you saw on Twitter and didn't check on it. So probably that's why the articulation comes from. But what was the other part of the questions?
Expression and creativity.
Expression. Ukrainians are very creative. They are extremely creative, entrepreneurial, and it just sucks that every generation of Ukrainians has to overcome some bullshit invader or some bullshit political oppressive system. Because imagine what Ukraine could be if we had like 50 years when no one would try to kill us. Imagine. There would be that meme of like, you know, the town of the city of the future with flying cars and shit. But yeah, we are very creative. We have a lot to show. It's just like we're getting killed all the time and you can see the stuff that we're trying to put out. But yeah, I wish you would. I wish you take like 1 hour of your daily scrolling and just Google about Ukrainian artists and fashion brands and technology, because Ukrainians are an incredibly technological nation. We had like electronic ID since 2020. I have this app on my phone that I can pay taxes, open business, close business, get married in an app. Every document in the app. Everything. I know that there are apps made by Ukrainians on your phones right now. I know it.
I believe I've heard you say that Ukrainians love digitalization of everything.
Yeah, yeah. If it can be digitalized, we'll probably do it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because again, it's like this chunk of young people that didn't have to get the burden of previous system. So they were like, what if we're gonna make it easier from the get-go? And yeah, it takes a learning curve, like, but now we can't think, we got used to it so fast that we expect this. That's why it's such a big difference when coming abroad and seeing that other countries do not take digitalization to the same level that we do. So it's a bit painful at times, but.
Take me back to 2022.
All right.
You recorded your special.
I did.
Your career is going amazing, both from your own career, but your comedy career is you're getting thousands of views online. And then in February 2022, the invasion happens. What happens next for you personally? How does your life change?
So you learn to.
Could you set the scene? Like, what did your day look like when Russia invaded?
Oh, absolutely, because it was a couple of weeks of this like tension in the air. The headlines were troubling, like, oh, Russia is massive forces on the border, but you know, it's not. You have to understand that it's not the first time Russia did that. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014. That was the first invasion. So, and for many years there was like proper fighting happening on the east of Ukraine that was shelling and bombing in Russian troops in Ukraine. So it's not something that we were like, didn't happen before, that was so out of touch and out of character for Russia. But I think a lot of people, myself included, we were in disbelief that something like this can happen in 2022, because what do you mean? We're in the middle of Europe, we're the biggest country in Europe, and we can just be invaded. And what do you, how is that, is this the world we're living in? So a lot of us, myself included, unfortunately, stupidly, still believed in international institutions, which I don't anymore. And I remember that day, my friends and I were like, the tension was so palpable. We were like, you know what, we're gonna go to a bar, just have a nice evening. So we went to a bar, and we had this like semi-serious, semi-jokish talks. And we're like, what are we gonna do? We're gonna do, and we were like, oh, this is so like in remarks, work. And I remember we had some drinks. We talked. I got home and at about probably 1 a.m., 1:30 a.m. after the bar. I went to sleep, and I woke up at 5 something from like loud noises, from which I learned later were missile strikes. And I remember I woke up, I looked at my phone, I saw 168 messages on my group chat, and my heart sank. Yeah, even now, even talking about it, I have this like feeling of my body still going, it just tenses up, because yeah. And I remember how I was completely lost. I did not understand what to do. I even remember I was like, do I go to work today? Like, what should I do? Because you don't know what to do. And I started like, I went to a shower, I started eating my breakfast, I heard the explosion, like the missile strikes again. I looked out of my balcony, I looked out, like, and people were just walking, none of them were running. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to work. But then in half an hour, they were like, nah, we don't think you should come to work. So I did my dishes, and I texted my friend, she lived not that far from me, and I was like, because I lived alone. And I was like, hey, can I come to your place? Because I don't feel, I don't want to be alone now. So I went to her, and some other friends came, and we just started doing something that we currently do for 3 years now, even more, which is we started to read news. And from time to time, we would run to the underground parking because there was shelling and air raids. Yeah, so that was the first day. I would even remember that I was a little bit numb because I didn't understand what was happening. But it was the news. The news were coming every minute, and each like next update would be even more horrifying than the previous one, and you couldn't look up, you couldn't not read, you couldn't stop reading that. So yeah, and then we slept in the underground parking, and the day after, I think I didn't, and then I went, I stayed for a little bit with my friend, and then I went a little bit later I was trying to get to my parents, because that was something that was very important to me. And yeah, the way we were getting out of Kyiv, there was like shellings left and right. Yeah, the car was like shaking from impact waves, you call it? Impact waves. Yeah, so there's that.
Can you first of all, thanks for sharing that. I can see it's distressing, and it really paints a unfortunate full color picture for me as someone who has never faced a disruption or invasion or a war or an outbreak like this. And my body goes into a little bit of shock hearing it. I can't imagine what it feels like to be someone that witnessed it and was in the action of it all. And I just want to say thank you for sharing that.
You're most
How did the remainder of the days unfold after that?
Oh, it was days after. I got to my parents and I took the socks off because I were not able to take the socks off for a couple of days. That was amazing. I really, really liked it. The feeling of not having those socks on my feet, oof. I, for some reason, remember that. Yeah. But yeah, it mostly was like, uh, you would, we started work, you would actually, what was the most bizarre thing is we would resume working. The company I was working for, we started working, I believe, on the third or fourth day of invasion. And that's telling something about Ukrainians. We were like, all right, we had a couple of days, but those meetings, those KPIs, baby, you really have to meet them. Those OKRs. Yeah, that's what also people don't understand is that despite the war, missiles and stuff, you still have to work. You still have to do stuff. You still have to do the work commitments you had before. Probably the most surreal experience is me once giving a team presentation of a new feature we developed, and I was like giving a team presentation for my colleagues. Some of them were international, and mid that presentation, I hear a fighter jet above my house, which is an unmistakable sound, and I was like, I'm so sorry. I really have to go to the hall of the apartment because there's at least two walls from me and the outer world, which was a system we used for a while in Ukraine and still do, which means you have to be at least behind two walls from if there's going to be an impact. So the first wall takes the impact and the second wall takes the pieces, the shrapnel and pieces of the building. So there was like a recommendation to hide before. And I had like, I'm so sorry, colleagues. I'm gonna just have to move, and then I will continue. And this is something that you have to do. Like people complaining that they had to work during the pandemic. I raised you one to have to work during the shelling. A lot of people in Ukraine work in shelters. They work in underground parkings, in subway underground stations, because this is the reality. You still have to work. You still have to like do what you have to do, and then on top of it, you have like another thing, which is, and by the way, don't die. That would be shitty, right? So yeah.
Was that the moment that you realized you no longer felt safe in your own city and country that you're proud of?
Yeah, that's probably the most. That's the thing that I got the angriest about, is that I walked into my apartment that I really loved. I rented it, but it was in city center of Kyiv. It was a very good neighborhood. It was a very good apartment. It has an incredible view. My bills paid. I was a self-sufficient woman, like. And then I remember going into that apartment and understanding that I don't feel safe there. And it was a crushing feeling because you felt it for the first time in your life in on this like physical way. And because I lived on 11th floor, which is not ideal if missiles are raining on your city. You would like to stay lower, which, yeah. And I lived in 11th floor, and I lived in a neighborhood that was routinely targeted. And every time it would get targeted, it would get closer and closer to the building that I was living in. And I was like, the God is sending me a sign that I should get out. Because literally every time it would be like 100 meters closer, 100 meters closer. And I would see it from my window. Yeah, so at some point I was like, I unfortunately can't stay here. Yeah, and and I would admit that I'm a big, big coward because a lot of people stayed and I couldn't. So yeah, I still blame myself for that.
At what point did you have to leave Ukraine?
I left in...
Was it a decision, or was it primarily survival?
I would say it was for my neighborhood where I lived in Kyiv. Yeah, it was just unsafe to stay, but it was also because for many, many reasons, like you couldn't stay there, you didn't have safety there. There was what other places you can go. People keep telling that there are like safe areas in Ukraine, which there are safer areas in Ukraine, but you know the joke I do that that Russians bomb schools, hospitals, they're very big on inclusivity. They are very inclusive in terms of areas they bomb. So there isn't a region that didn't have any impact at all. So that's why no matter where you would go, there would be still a very real threat. So that's why it was like, it's hard to explain to people because Ukraine is so huge. It's 3 times as big as the UK. Kyiv has a population of Scotland. It's a 5 million city. And it's getting shelled every night. So imagine the whole population of Scotland being bombed every night, and everyone just accepted it. Like, it is what it is. So yeah, and I left, and it wasn't easy, and yeah, it's hard to explain to people, probably.
Did you bring anything that was deeply sentimental or symbolic that grounded you from Ukraine? Anything that really meant something to you that you represented in your day-to-day life when you moved?
Oh, of course, I brought the embroidered shirt. I sometimes perform in it now, and because we have the traditional clothing, which is embroidered shirts. It's a very incredible tradition. It's different from region to region. It has a lot of meaning. They can be modern, traditional. I love it. You should Google it. It's vyshivanka. I brought it, the embroidered shirt, and which was something weird that I brought. I brought red leather Zara shoes that I filmed my special in. Never wore them since, but for some reason I brought them. I thought it was like, I really, it's hard to explain. I even took them from Kyiv when I was first escaping. That also was weird. I was like taking nuts, seeds, like a screwdriver, and red leather Zara shoes.
Do you remember your last conversation you had in Ukraine before you left?
Oh yeah, with my parents. Yeah, horrible. You just, yeah, you're promising to call, and they're very worried about you, and you have no idea where you're going, and you have no idea what will happen. You just have, yeah, and that's it. And you have this understanding that you have to make sure that you will do well at a new place. So if anything will go down, you will be able even to help for example, your parents, your family. So yeah, but mostly it was like something I think every parent say, like, hey, we're worried about you, we love you. Call us as often as you can and stuff. Yeah. And I believe that's what every parent would do, but that was very special circumstances.
When you arrived in Scotland, were there support systems to allow you to make that transition?
Oh, absolutely. Please finish your question first. That was.
No, that's the question.
I mean, I cannot describe how grateful I am for Scotland and Scottish people because they, for some, and I know that now why there was like deeper, better understanding of Ukrainians and what they went through, because Scotland was the only, I believe it was the only country in the UK that had this super scheme for homes for Ukraine, which was the state could be the sponsor. So Ukrainians were living on like cruise ship boats and hotels, right? I had hosts that hosted me for some period of time. But there were social workers that we worked with, and there were we were able to, we were given work permissions, which allowed us to start looking for work right away, which most Ukrainians did. Like some of the people who didn't speak English, it was harder to them, but a lot of Ukrainians started looking for work because Ukraine don't have a lot of social support systems. That's why people rely on themselves mostly. And what people don't understand about Scotland is you have it. I understand it's hard to accept, but you have it pretty good in terms of government setting support systems for you. And I completely understand that you might think that's not the case. I'm just saying it by comparison. So yeah, I believe Scotland put a lot of effort and to accept Ukrainians, and I will be forever grateful for that. Yeah.
What was your own impression of Scotland as a place? Did it feel like home, or just a holding point until you can return back to your home?
Yeah, you don't consider anything home for a while, and I believe that's true for anyone that moves. Especially considering the circumstances. When I came, I did not realize for how long I will be here. I couldn't plan anything. I remember first time I was starting getting like open mics and gigs, and people would then contact me and say, like, for example, that was March 2023, they were like, are you willing to do the spot on Fringe, which was August? And I was like, I have no idea where I'm gonna be in August. So I would turn down all these opportunities and deals because I couldn't plan that long. We lost the ability to plan in Ukraine for a while now, and I'm only now still slowly getting it back, but not really. And so I believe that Scotland, I call it home away from home now, but for a very long time I couldn't understand what to do and where to go, and I believe that's something that puts you in this weird limbo when you're like, you're not there, you're nowhere. You lost a sense of safety at home, but you can't gain a sense of safety here because it's like a foreign place. So for a long time, I was grieving, and I was, I couldn't plan anything. So it was weird for me when people were like, oh, you're safe now, and be like, yeah, but anything could change. I thought I was safe at home, and that was the biggest difference.
When I was preparing for this podcast and just thinking about you and your story, that was one of the things that I was thinking about, this weird tension between gratitude for sanctuary, but equal, disproportionate amounts of grief for what you lost. And trying to hold both of those things at the same time, the grief for what you lost and the gratitude for sanctuary at the same time.
You can feel those feelings at the same time. I'm extremely grateful for the sanctuary, and I believe everyone that had to leave their homes in Ukraine is. But at the same time, you feel immense amount of grief. That's something I said in the beginning, that for me, I grieved. My grief was channeled in weird ways. For example, I was grieving my plants from my apartment, that they all died. And it was very weird, but I would cry about the dead plants in my apartment. And it was something, and I didn't understand that I'm actually not grieving actual plants, but they were my kids. But I was grieving the lifestyle, I was grieving the home, I was grieving the safety, and I was grieving this place I really liked. So I felt I grieved my comedy career that I thought was
It was popping.
It was popping. Let's do the lingo from TikTok. It was popping. It was hot and coming.
It really was. It really was. Hundreds of thousands of eyes on you and your comedy, and then you have to rebuild it brick by brick in your second language.
Ego death, third.
Third language.
Ego death, instant.
What was your proficiency of English when you moved here?
It was quite good, but it was with American accent, unfortunately. I am so sorry. Because when I was a student, I used to work in call centers at night, selling health insurance to Americans.
So when you returned to comedy here in Scotland, what were the biggest challenges, besides the ego death of falling back in love with this prosperous thing that was popping off in Ukraine?
The biggest challenge was how to make something as painful and dark into something that would appeal to people that never had this experience.
Scottish men.
Classics.
It's one of our jokes, it's fine.
It's a lot of jokes about Scottish men. You should see it. Yeah, it was just like, how can I make this constant pain in me and, you know, my desire to scream constantly, how can I make it into a setup and a punchline?
Has it been a form of healing for you?
No, I believe it's a form of, this is my way of keep reminding people that this is still happening. I apologize, but it's not a form of healing. For me, telling jokes about Russian invasion and Ukraine is not a form of healing. You know what would heal me? Fighter jets. That would heal me big times.
Do you feel like you're finding your voice or sharing your voice on the matter, or just translating it?
Translating it. What do you think? What do you mean by that?
I think there's a cohort of people who turn a blind eye to foreign politics and are scared to look at it because it feels bigger and out of their control, and they don't understand it. They don't have the education of the regime and the politics that sit behind it, and then the actual catastrophes that are going on there at the moment. So they kind of cast their eye away from it. But comedy is a really great bridge between people who are quite nihilistic and avoidant of the matter and the matter itself. Like, one thing that I really admire is that I remember my sister was lecturing me on some of the feminism ideologies, and she was giving me a bunch of writers and broadcasters to watch, and I had this weird disdain. I will admit, I had this weird disdain towards it at first, and then suddenly we go.
Man.
Typically, right? And then we go to a comedy show where someone's talking the exact same things, but delivered via comedy, and then the penny dropped. It clicked. It was translated to me. It met me where I was, and then I had this new level of empathy, understanding, and education. So, like, do you feel like comedy is almost like a way of you translating what's going on?
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. Yeah, absolutely. Because, as you said, most people, I don't think they're like afraid of foreign policy, but I believe they think that it's none of their business. It's something as a lesser priority to them. So there's something lesser on their priority of daily to-do tasks. So they reserve the understanding of foreign policy to headlines, and headlines are very manipulative, and they sometimes tell a story that not there. So I believe sometimes I'm trying to translate what does that actually mean. So, for example, I remember people, the most common thing is like, oh, but Ukraine is getting billions. Ukraine got billions, and you're like, do you know what that actually means? Do you know what billions would actually mean? Because Ukraine is not given hard cash. I know, shocker. But for example, UK committed to, if I'm not mistaken, please check, that is like 18.3 billion aid to Ukraine. If that is put on a headline and someone is reading it, it's like, what do you mean? That's a huge ton of money. But then when you actually read into it, it's like, oh, out of those 18 billions, 13 billions is a military aid, which means it's not a hard cash money. It's already made like armored vehicles, already made weaponry that is 30 years outdated, that you cannot use in the UK. It would be way more expensive to utilize it in UK, but you then transfer it to Ukraine as outdated, and that outdated weapon is priced at 13 billions. Because I don't know if you know it, war is extremely expensive. That one tank costs a lot. So like 2 tanks already 1 billion. So when the person reads in the headline, it's like, UK gave Ukraine 18 billion, it sends shocker, like it's a shocker for any like regular person, because that's a headline that's very manipulative. But then you will go with, oh, it's 13 billion military aid worth at 13 billion, and then out of the rest of it is like 2.3 billion is a loan that will be paid back to Ukraine, to UK, from frozen Russian assets. Because if you know it, UK has a lot of Russian assets. Russian rich people really like UK. I don't know, maybe it's the colonizer thing, but it's you have a lot of frozen Russian assets in the UK, and the one of the loan that was given will be paid back to UK from frozen Russian assets. So again, people don't do the research, they rely on headlines. Headlines are very manipulative. They aim to get people to click or not even click, just to get this reaction. And then there's like Ukrainians that are like, so again, if you're giving me a coffee worth 20 pounds, did you give me 20 pounds or did you give me a coffee that worth 20 pounds? So it's like very like repetitive explanation, because when people will keep reading those headlines, they will grow hostile of Ukrainians. Yeah. And the hostility towards Ukrainians, that was already at a high level, but that because people will reserve to headlines, because people will reserve to someone they talk to, right? That read the headlines. You tend to form this view, and if there's no one that will give you an explanation to that or will give you actual context, especially Ukrainian, you will solidify that view of Ukraine, and you will then broadcast it, right? So one of the ways I'm doing it, and I'm like explaining stuff that, no, it's not like that, it's actually like this, and by the way, we're still getting bombed every day, you're just not seeing in the news anymore, which is also true.
This manipulation of perception over acceptance of reality, for example, valuing aid at a price point that doesn't reflect the reality of how we're helping, it makes me think of this, and I'm saying this for the first time aloud, and it might not be right, so do excuse me if I'm getting this wrong, but it's one of my perceptions of why working class, lower socioeconomic people don't accept or care about foreign policy is that they see these headlines like, okay, 13, 18, hundreds of billions of other, billions of pounds or dollars of aid has been sent to Ukraine. Therefore, I don't have an individualistic responsibility because these other organizations and bodies are supporting. So I don't have a role to play because my £5 a month to an independent charity is not going to help. And I think it's the same mindset towards climate change for working class people. Actually, I've had this thought before that working class, lower socioeconomic people are trying to pay their bills, buy their food, keep themselves clothed and warm. And then when they see headlines that are like 13.4 billion has been transferred in aid, they don't think that they have a part to play. Perhaps they feel like they need their own needs met before they can then care about this foreign affair.
I think it's very human nature to make sure your own needs met, right, before caring for someone else. And I think it's something that also very interesting perspective. I don't think I thought about it like that, but luckily I know hundreds of examples of regular people in the UK stepping up and helping. And they did not think that, oh, the government did the part, so therefore they don't have to lift a finger. Thousands of people in the UK did. Thousands of people took a time of their day to read an article, contact someone from Ukraine and, ask them how they were doing, open their homes to Ukrainians, which was incredible. I also think in the UK you have this big culture of charity. You have a lot of charity causes, and it is a very big part of your society. You have a lot of charity like events, charity send mail to you regularly, which was something very weird. I never had it before. And so I think many of you already understand how a small donation can make a big difference, right? And I think
And charity doesn't have to be financial. It can be time. It can be advocacy.
oh, absolutely. If I could ask people, if you don't have any like money to make a donation, please don't. We don't want to give something that you need to put food on the table. Absolutely not. But if you can't, look into what is happening, search for news about Ukraine, and then talk to people in your life about Ukraine. About like, have you heard? Like 2 days ago, Russia launched one of the biggest attacks on Ukraine. Over 500 missiles and drones overnight. Is the biggest in modern history. Should make headlines. Didn't. So if you like can talk to people, like, have you heard that what is happening? And then if the person will start spewing stuff like that of something they heard and didn't actually looked into, like, oh yeah, but we're sending them billions. Like, do you know what are we actually sending them? What is the military aid that we are entailing them? Like, what is actually happening? That would mean the world to me without any monetary contribution.
Do you feel that Ukraine has now slipped the hearts and minds of the public because of other conflicts that are ongoing at the moment? How do you feel that other conflicts are dominating public attention whilst yours is going on, but now a bit more silently?
I had this joke in my routine, and I'm sorry for like try to drop my jokes into this podcast. Is that
Well, comedy is a reflection of society and reality. We kind of joke in the comedy world that the world's shit out there, so we can laugh about it in here. So
Yeah.
I think it's a metaphor for life.
Yeah. Oh, all right. I'll take that. So I have a joke that like people asking me if I'm angry that nobody's talking about Ukraine anymore and talking about this other shiny conflicts, and I say like, no, I'm not angry anymore because I was angry the first time the world shifted their attention from Ukraine, and that happened during Johnny Depp's divorce. Because that's literally what happened. So does this make me sad that the public attention is flaky? Absolutely. Have I already accepted it? Yes, but that's why I'm also keep screaming about it, and I keep making people uncomfortable with stuff that I still talk about my home every day. But I don't think that could be in any other way. Of course, you're gonna talk about your home. Of course, you're gonna keep reminding people that what is happening. Of course, you're gonna do whatever it takes. It's your home. Everyone loves their home. And I understand that Scottish people have this, they have this like heightened sense of independence, individuality. They have strong understanding what they want to do and where they want to go. And I believe that that's why they understand Ukrainians that much. But
I also think it's a mindset thing of care, peace, and consideration isn't a zero-sum game or a finite resource. So what I'm saying is that if you care for what's going on in the Middle East, it doesn't mean you shouldn't care about what's going on elsewhere in the world.
I believe I believe that I applaud everyone that had the privilege of the distance but decided to advocate for a cause far away from them that is seemingly not affecting them on a daily basis. If you had this ability just to lay on the couch and do nothing and you decided to talk about this cause, props to you. What I don't like if people that advocate for any cause try to do, as I call it, the Genocide Olympics, which is they start bringing this other thing to heighten how horrible this thing is by diminishing the other thing without actually knowing what's happening on the other thing. And I see it all the time. It's like, oh, if Russia did this, insert war crime, we would be fuming by now. But the joke is, Russia already did this. If you're putting anything like, oh, if Russia killed that many people, it did. Oh, if Russia bombed the hospital, it did. You didn't care. You didn't care. There was no outrage. There were so hospitals razed. There were so many medical workers killed. There were so many people starved, tortured, raped, and you didn't care. But you need to make this talking point to bring attention to some double standards And only in that case, you remembered about my home and you brought it as a weird comparison. And this is something that rubs me the wrong way, and I will never stop talking about it, that you can advocate for your cause without diminishing the others. If you can't do that, maybe take a step back and learn how to advocate for your cause without erasing other people's suffering. It's just, I wish more people did that, and I believe that would make their effort more effective.
I want to end on this. What does peace look like for you personally and politically?
Very easy. Peace for me is not a single Russian soldier in Ukraine. Ukraine's recognized international borders restored circa 1991. I don't accept anything else. No one will. There is a NATO status in Ukraine, and there is a shit ton of weapon in Ukraine. So if any Russian would even look our way, there's going to be a missile pointing to him because, like, nah. So for me, peace through strength, right? That's the thing. People that claim they're anti-war, that they're pacifists, they're incredibly privileged. They've never heard a missile strike. And let me tell you, if you hear it at least one time, you quickly realize why do you need a weapon to protect yourself, and why the good guys should be armed better against the bad guys. So peace for me is a shit ton of weapon in Ukraine that will guarantee that no one else will try to do the thing that Russia did for the last 300 years.
Iryna Gil, thank you for your insights, your advocacy, but most importantly, your story.
Thank you so much, David.